So today I want to talk to you about my first spiritual awakening. And that happened quite a long time ago. Now, of course, it's been about 4 years or so that I've really actively been speaking about spirituality and the spiritual path. But it took me a while to realize that I had an awakening when I was a teenager, and I didn't know what it was. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about how that unfolded, and kind of let you get some insights into things that you might encounter on your path. So when I was about 15 years old, of course, I was going through a stage of rebellion like a lot of teenagers do, and I had a very stern parent. And he was very, very rigid, rugged individual. And so it took me a lot of contemplation to really come to appreciate him and understand, he was coming from a place of love in his own way. And but I struggled with that as a child. I struggled with that a lot. There was a lot of things. I just felt like it was kind of a tyrannical kind of a relationship that I had to be under. And so I had a lot of inner resistance. My emotions were very tense. And I didn't like spending a lot of time with family. I preferred to be alone, just so I didn't have to be subject to any of those kinds of relationship dynamics. I didn't know how to deal with them as a kid. And of course, there wasn't any training that really helped me through that. It's just kind of one of those school of hard knocks things that I had to go through. Now, I'm just telling you this to give you a little bit of the background, because since then, my parent has passed on, and I've come to terms with all of this. I've come to the realization of forgiveness for a lot of the things that I couldn't handle at that point. But I just want to let you know that this is kind of the context that my first spiritual awakening unfolded in. So one day I was in trouble, okay, and my parents sat me down at the table to have a chat with me. But before I get into that, I want to share a real quick passage with you. So I'm looking at the King James Version here. Matthew 23, 9 through 11. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. Now I like that last verse because it's actually showing you some insight that those who are above you, who are greater, as far as their status is concerned, even spiritually speaking, and more importantly so, spiritually speaking, the ones who are above you, they are helping you. They're providing things that are going to help you on your path because they've come to understand some things. They've reached certain mile markers on their path. And yes, there is a timeline, so to speak, of evolution. But to clarify that, it's kind of not that way, because really you have to go beyond time in order to even begin the path. But there is some kind of middle ground of evolutionary process that takes place. And if you watch enough of these videos, you'll start to see that, the words are really pointing to that place of evolution for the spiritual journey. So this passage is why I'm saying parent and not dad or not father, okay? But anyway, so let's get back to the story. I'm sitting at the table, and there's this whole laundry list of things that are being told to me that I should be doing this and I should be listening to this and this and this. And it was like, that was the day where I felt like emotionally, that was kind of where the straw was to break the camel's back. And I'd had enough of it. My emotions, I just couldn't take it. And in an instant, I was sitting there And all of a sudden I just decided, I'm not going to listen to any of this anymore. I'm just going to sit here, and if I get beat, I'm just going to take it. I'm not going to respond. Now, you might think that's a rude thing to do, and that requires more punishment for, a teenager acting like that. But again, my emotions just couldn't handle it at that point. I couldn't do it. But in that moment of surrendering to the possibility of, the unknown, and really just embracing the fear of what could happen in that, that rebellious moment, if you will, a space opened up inside of me. And it was kind of like the Peanuts characters, the talking was going on in the room, and it's like I wasn't even there anymore almost. It was just like, wah, 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 the words were there, but something opened up, and it was like I was just experiencing a totally different dimension. And I just sat there and I stared at this point on the wall. And while this space was opening up, it was like all the burden of that emotional baggage that I had built up psychologically, it just collapsed. Everything collapsed in that moment. And really, it's like like I said, it's like I was taken out of that whole tense experience and really just kind of, it's like I knew everything was okay in that moment. So in that moment, I was trying to figure out what was going on. I didn't understand it. And it took me, almost 20 years to really come to an understanding of what that was all about. So it's only in retrospect that the final understanding of what that was actually has come to clarity. What was missing in my understanding at that time was that I was still trying to identify with my psychological identity, my held self-image. And so that's why it didn't make sense. That's why this awakening didn't make sense. And so for years after that, I continued thinking that here I am, this self-image in my mind, and I have to keep following that. And this is what everybody on the planet who's an ordinary individual is doing. They're holding up a self-image in their mind, and they're trying to service that by being a better person, or, some of them feel like they're making their mark on the world by doing bad things. Either side of it, the movement is the same. There's a psychological identity that's being identified with. And so this was the obstacle that I had to come to the realization of in order to move from a state of what now I understand is called negative enlightenment into a more positive state of spiritual existence, where actual evolution in spiritual light actually can take place consciously. So let this be an understanding for you that as long as you're identified with your self-image in your mind, that's preventing you from seeing deeper into your true essential nature and into your truer identity of who you are, your only true identity of who you are. And that's what spiritual awakening is all about, is coming to that meeting place inside and exploring who you are beyond who you think you are, and beyond who the world has told you that you should be, and beyond your activities as a doer or an action figure in the world. And so that's how my first awakening began. So I'd just like to add to that, and I won't go into it too much here, that some other things really started unfolding at that point in time that also I didn't understand had also a spiritual root to them. And it's because of that first awakening that a lot of the things that unfolded from that point on have been showing up spiritually in my life. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it at all. But there are so many things, that the average individual might just consider bizarre. But once you start tuning into your spiritual reality and you can see beyond the limitations that you're holding in your mind, there's some more depth to your experience. And you really start to appreciate the gift of life that this human experience actually is. So I hope this video was helpful for you. Please go over to the Patreon page and show your support. And I look forward to sharing more with you in the next video. Blessings.